And for the prime minister, he sees foreign policy as an easier win, given the challenges onshore to implement these very politically difficult measures, such as subsidies rationalization, which likely
Right.
will increase inflationary pressure.
Right, it's a big move actually for them to try and rationalize and bring down those subsidies. But I want to touch on that point you brought up about diplomatic relations. Malaysia and a number of leaders, including Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, have continuously said they want to remain neutral with regards to the relations between their two biggest trading partners, the U.S. and China. But with tensions between these two countries growing even more and them perhaps becoming more polarized, do you think it's going to be difficult and perhaps create economic headwinds for Malaysia as they try to maintain this neutrality in these very interesting and very unique times?
Actually, I believe that a medium size and medium power country like Malaysia can gain wins, right, if it maintains a neutral stance. Because both China and the US need more funds. It needs a neutral country. It is still too expensive, even with the subsidies, to produce everything in the US, right? In capital intensive, it makes sense because given the chip subsidies. But you still need a country like Malaysia to arbitrage that. Secondly, I think for China, it's the same. The tensions mean that it needs a third friendly country to export. And not only that, somewhere that's recipient to its final export as well, because it needs to export its external demand. But I argue that Malaysia should look just not to the US and China. It should look to the EU, right? The EU is a country that's actually quite aggressive in a large enough market for trade globalization. The EU also needs a friendly country to diversify supply chains. And I think that's an easy win that Malaysia can get to negotiate the EU FTA. Not only that, also the Gulf countries are also an area where Malaysia should diversify. And I think and also North Asia. So in general, I think for Malaysia, this is a tailwind, a geopolitical tailwind that it can capitalize on. The danger is that it doesn't want to lean too much on one side, right? A good example is Indonesia with nickel. When Indonesia has too much dependency on China, it's very difficult for Indonesia to get that FTA it needs to qualify the IRA. So then it needs to find a more balanced relation between the West and China.